Can we have the PowerPoint?
Yes, sure.
Marhaban. Perhaps some of you will be surprised to know that in the middle of the 19th century, the total population of the world was already 1.3 billion. You will be even more surprised to know that a very tiny proportion of this, less than 5% or so, was living in urban areas. The demographic landscape of that time was overwhelmingly rural. The adventure of urbanization took many years, and today we have 7.5 billion people living in the planet, and as much as 4.2 billion are urban dwellers. In 2007, United Nations informed to the world that a major milestone has been achieved when the urban population outnumbered the rural population. This was the advent of the Homo urbanus, a new species that thinks, acts, dreams in a way that is based on an urban mindset and an urban culture. And we can ask ourselves, what is an urban culture? And UN-Habitat would like to present to you in a different, interesting way what is culture for us and how it's integrated in our program. In 1963, an anthropologist, Krugman, came with 164 definitions of what is urban. I was given very short time, and then I'm going to present to you only 100 of these definitions. No, in reality, what I'm going to tell you is how culture is made. And it's made of two important different things. One, we call it the functional part of culture, and the other, the anthropological. It has to do with human creation. It has to do with intellectual creation that forms our beliefs, our capabilities, the way we think, our habits, our morals. All this together creates a knowledge based on what culture can represent for us. And all this underpins the notion that culture becomes a public asset. At the same time, culture has to do with the way we act, the way we think, the way we organize ourselves, the ways we are creative and innovative, but very importantly, the way we also manifest and vindicate for our rights in the cities or in the places where we live. Culture for you and Habitat, and I'm sure for you, is very important for change. This is the way we understand culture. In this presentation, I would like to tell you how urbanization trends, urbanization way that it configured in regions and conditions were influencing culture, creativity, innovation. And at the same time, how innovation and creativity influence urbanization. Let me give you some of the major urbanization trends of the world and the relationship to culture. Let me start with history and very fast, because of time, of course. During the Industrial Revolution, that was the moment that urbanization advanced the faster, what we saw is the emergence of industrial centers that were the most important transmitters of global culture. They were highly influential in the way the culture was moving to all cities. But at the same time, and this is a very interesting thing, and purposely we wanted that you cannot read very clear this, is that culture was local, geographic, and global. I think Richard Sennett is here with us, and he said something very beautiful that I would like to say. Culture was being created in countless different creative ways in different spaces and different locations. With time, and we can say this, new centers, new regions emerge, and they compete for the importance and become these transmitters of global culture. Global culture was then rural, was then local, and then was global. As we change, then when I study architecture and geography last year, I'm sorry, last century, but not the century when the world was 5% urban. The world was only understood as large cities, secondary cities, small cities. And then we saw the beginning of a new geographic manifestations of power, a new concentration of cities in different constellations. This brought to us the idea that culture was not any longer dominated by large nations, but was taking a different geographic shape in which culture was associated to this concentration of cities in urban corridors, mega regions, and different forms. Culture becomes a network. Culture becomes a flow of people, a flow of merchandise, a flow of ideas. Later on, UN-Habitat presented a work in 2016, very interesting new findings in which all cities in the world, from the global north, the south, the east, or the west, all of them had something in common. They grew 3 times more of their population. They were expanding in endless peripheries, creating very important conditions for sustainability. Higher cost of energy, more CO2 emissions, etc. But at the same time, reducing, importantly, residential densities. Densities in the last 20 years reduced by almost 40%. And when this happened, they compromised the way innovation, creativity, critical mass of people living in cities can create culture and use it. We always talk about growth and urbanization, but the reality is that the world also has been largely influenced by the shrinking cities. Shrinking cities is not a reduction of population, it's a negative growth. In some exception, it comes with quality of life, but most of the time, it brings decay. It brings some form affecting social integration of population. And then when we study urbanization and culture, we understand that we need to divide some forms of planning for growth and also planning for decay. And when this happens, culture, creativity, and innovation take a completely different stand. This is the way we also should deal urbanization with culture. And then cities in the world have been changing and growing. We say they are the best and sometimes the worst of humanity. They are order, and sometimes they are chaos. And when they are this, they are the breeding grounds of forms of exclusion, marginalization, and poverty in different parts of the world. We can see here 75% of cities in the world in the last 2 decades grew more unequal than today. It means that 2.1 billion people live in places where access to opportunities, resources, income conditions are less accessible to them in this world. When this happens, what we see very clearly is that marginalization, exclusion, poverty is appearing in our cities. This manifestation change creates a fundamental change. Culture takes a different perspective. It becomes at the forefront of social movements. And when it's at the forefront of social movements, what we can see is the demonstrations in cities taking physically, taking symbolically places in a way that they use and reproduce culture, innovation, and creativity locally, but also using some global standards and changes. Look at this, extremely interesting. Only from September up to December, when this map was done, is portraying the number of meetings related to climate change in the world. 4 months in the last time. Culture becomes, in that sense, clearly, and cities the incubators of social change, political change, different forms in which cities will manifest, creating new loyalties, creating new allegiances, creating new identities. When this happens, we really think, why we don't use all these powers for the sake of collective creativity and development? The executive director mentioned in her initial presentation that when cities integrate in the operative mechanism innovation and creativity, when they are open to hear different voices, when they integrate legitimized decisions and creativity, cities are different. UN-Habitat has done, and because of time, later we can present in more detail if you want, some of the important changes in the way culture and in the last, say, 20, 30 years have been changing in response to urbanization and planning. One very clear practice comes with the idea that culture was used mostly to produce resources. In this moment, we are talking about fantasies, city branding that was artificial, a lot of Western-sized models and other things that created gentrification, exclusion, and territorial disadvantages in some moments. Then we move to a second important moment. Culture, innovation, creativity were integrated into the city development. We started to talk about, for the first time, of sense of place and the idea that we need to respect public and private spaces altogether. When this happened, the model was really changing to the idea that we need more solidarity, communality, much more integration, shared legacies in our cities. We need urban renewal that is based on participation of people. And then a final moment that we, UN-Habitat, fully subscribe and we believe is part of the SDGs, is the idea that culture, innovation, creativity converge with governance mechanisms, and altogether, what they do is to create a different form of cities. Our representative from UNESCO said something important. Cities, culture, and innovation become drivers of change, of sustainable development, and they become very important ways to realize SDGs in cities. All this to tell you that innovation, creativity requires also technology, but a different form of technology. One in which we understand that this equation, technology started with people being a number, a source. Technology moved to the idea that we become consumers of this data, and today we are the interface with technology to look in a much more intelligent manner to the way we can change our cities in terms of urban intelligence, growth, and development. When this happened, we started talking about new smart cities. But for UN-Habitat, smart cities is not only driven by business, it's not only driven by the idea that technology should be dictating everything. The Secretary General said recently, technology has never served the purpose of humanity like today, but technology has also never departed from equality like today. And we need a different form of technology. And for this, what we need, look this picture that I took in Mexico, a family having a day together, each one looking at their own technology. With a technology that serves the people, a technology that is considered as a public good, and technology that supports education. When we do this, cities become the incubators of social, economic, and political transformation. And UN-Habitat, what it's doing is supporting this transformation. Thank you very much.